Adam, I'm sorry.
Oh, for tonight. I thought you were apologizing for earlier because I wanted to get this off my chest that you
Sure.
humbled me. I think you got like a fatality, a meeting fatality. I think that everyone knows that sidebar
meeting fatality. Oh God, it was great.
I think
I didn't
everyone knows that sidebar conversations happen during meetings.
Yes.
You DM'd me during a meeting in a way that just murdered me. Like I had giggle fits and needed to turn off my camera.
Oh, that's
And
great.
then I turned my camera back on, but the message was still on the screen and I was back in giggle fits.
You're
So,
back in giggle fits, and then you were giggling so much, I started giggling. I mean, I felt like the bomb maker was, I kind of like lost a hand.
You're taking yourself out. Yeah.
Absolutely taking myself out. Yeah, no, that was just, it was a little too much giggling.
Yeah. Just had to get that off my chest.
Well, no, there we go. I was not expecting that, actually. I was not expecting because you always do this for a little bit of reaction. There's a little bit of a, little bit of a smart ass remark. And then I looked at him like, oh my God, he's reading something. Oh my God, I think he's actually, I think I've got
dead. He is dead, right? I have won this meeting.
I've won this meeting. It took 4 years to get here. But I feel that's good.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I feel like, a bit like Killer Mike on the Grammys last night. I kind of felt like I swept it. I felt, finally age 50. Like, don't give up on yourselves, folks.
It's just like that. It's exactly like that.
It's exactly like that's what everyone was telling me. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah. That's right.
That's how everyone was telling me.
But where are we? How do we get here?
Yeah, this is what I need to apologize for. I'm sorry. And I think you would be right to ask, well, what do you think you're sorry for? Is this
no, it feels like conversations I've had with my children. Yes,
right, which is the usual response I get when I there are actually quite a few things you could be apologizing for, and I actually don't know which one you think you're referring to, but I know
just narrow it down a little, right?
Narrow it down a little, and I know whatever this is going to be very underwhelming. I think, and I've been reflecting on this, like, am I sorry that we're here, or am I sorry that I'm not sorry? And it might be that. I am, and for that, like, I'm like total, like 100% remorse. I'm very like the fact that, like, why are we here? Why are we getting trolled by the internet? And why do I not have the ability to like resist it? Where's my, and there was, it was actually interesting to read the comments. There, some people were like, you got to fight this. Like, come on, like, no.
It's like, you mean people saying you're better this, and you're saying, the heck I am. I'm not better than this. This is exactly how I am.
A FreeBSD Frau on Twitter, I followed for many years, mutual for many years. And FreeBSD Frau was like, fight the temptation. Like, and I'm sorry, FreeBSD Frau. I have failed. I failed you, but more importantly, I have failed myself. I failed us all. I really feel like I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like, why do we? What is it about the troll? Why does one get trolled? And I know, Adam, on this, and there were other people who are like, "Oh, this is okay. Great. We're taking Nate Silver tweets now. Is this an Oxide and Friends equivalent of a clip show, Adam? Are we
pretty accurate?
Is this just like, oh my God, like lazy writers? It's like, who's the guest? Oh, no one's the guest. You guys just read a Nate Silver tweet and get trolled over it. Okay, like this is entertainment now. I'm sorry.
Fonzie getting ready to jump over that shark. Absolutely.
Look, I'm sorry. The writers are on strike. Actually, we actually do have some really good shows in the works, like better than this one.
Actually, dear listener,
don't give up on us, please. Don't give up on us the way we have given up on ourselves. Please stay with us. No, we got some really good stuff, but we got, we got some exciting guests, and we just haven't quite lined them all up. And in part because I understand that we have guests that now would like more than 4 hours of notice before they appear. We're just like, oh, okay, all right. Well, now we'll give more than 4 hours of notice. So we this is not going to be every week, but I feel it is like once a quarter. I was trying to think, what is the cadence? Is that a reasonable?
I'm thinking back to, we had an episode called Trolltron Assemble, which the stats do not reflect on favorably. I'm just just mentioning now.
Oh God, I think I see why we're having this one-on-one. Okay, yeah, I see this graph you put in front of me. I don't know, what is that? Oh, that's what it is. Okay, yeah,
but yeah, quarterly sounds about right.
Well, so, but not that I'm going to do it for this tweet, but that ended up, that was the Sam Altman tweet that I ended up putting into that. That was the coming of age talk.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, I'd forgotten what it was about, but yeah.
Which I stapled into like I kind of like recovered my balance and turned it into a halfway decent talk. But the all right, so so anyway, I'm sorry for many things. I'm sorry for not being sorry. I'm sorry that we're here. I'm sorry that like other person on the internet is like, what are you guys gonna do like an episode like what water is wet, the earth is round? We might. I don't know. I can't say we won't. So at this
Stay
point,
tuned.
stay tuned. Exactly. So the tweet is from Nate Silver. Okay, first of all, what is your relationship with Nate Silver, Adam?
Oh,
Like, I mean,
I think like many, I don't know. Like, there was a time when 538 was like truth.
everything.
Like,
Totally.
yes, like if you reloaded enough, then things would become true, and it would, and that it had previously predicted, and then complicated after that.
Yeah, I kind of felt like I think like kind of 2016 was my Nate Silver kind of
Yeah,
apathy, and
yeah,
he rightly kind of called the 2016 election, and people were kind of figuring out where they stood after that, and then I don't know, something like a bolt came loose or something in his brain. I feel, and just started getting like a little bonkers, and then kind of more bonkers, and then some other stuff where it's like, all right, this is not what I came here for. I feel, and and it's kind of been watching a bit of a disintegration. So it sounds like I'm not the only one that has that
yeah.
feeling.
But sounds like you're still following the Nate Silver question mark.
Okay, that is a great question, and I actually do, I am still following him.
There we go. So that's how
Yeah, so
this tweet came across the
who's
radar.
really, I'm ready to wait for this. So so this is a tweet. The most important inventions of the decade of the 1900s versus the decade of the 2000s. You got to think like, oh, what's going to go wrong with this tweet? Nothing can go wrong here. Off to a great start. Pretty good evidence for secular stagnation. And then what's amazing is then so he's got these 10 inventions from the first decade of the 20th century. And these 10 inventions, can you see my air quotes, Adam? I'm not sure if the air quotes are coming through on the audio. You got any air quotes there? These 10 inventions from the first decade of the 21st century, and we're contrasting them, and we are drawing the conclusion that apparently innovation has stagnated. And I mean, I've got so many questions about this. Then, just to like answer one of the questions you might have, this is where again our colleague Eliza definitely made this observation as well. This is where it kind of like slips into like, what are we doing? It's like, what is the source for this? Oh, the source is mostly various LLMs, but I have to do a lot of verifying and vetting. It's like what, like Googling from the LLMs. Some inventions are hard to date precisely. Other suggestions are welcome. So there, I don't know, Adam. So had you not seen this until I dragged this dead mouse to you? Had you avoided this thing?
No, had not seen it. And I don't know, feels sort of baity. Feels like the kind of stuff that I see on Twitter these days.
Right. No, like, why am I here? Wait,
Yeah.
who do I have to blame other than myself?
But what do we mean by secular, and what do we mean by stagnation? What do you think?
Yes, I've got okay. These are really good questions. What do we mean by secular? What do we mean by, and I actually also feel like that is a word. It reminds me of the Simpsons episode where they talk about paradigm. Like, isn't paradigm just or that?
Yeah.
I kind of feel that with. I mean, because secular means like non-religious, right? I mean, secular mean that's the actual. But so when we talk about secular trends, I mean, we're talking about trends that are kind of separate. I mean, I use that to kind of talk about things that are kind of separated out from kind of like cycle. That this is like kind of a macro trend. And I guess that's what he means here. That this is a macro trend of the stagnation of innovation. I mean, it's just kind of so. I mean, there are a bunch of questions. So yeah, what do we mean by secular? What do we mean by stagnation? I don't know what that means. What are these actual inventions? When we say, what is an invention? You know what I mean? Like, theory of relativity is not an invention, right? Do we call is that an invention? I mean,
Tricky. I guess not. A discovery? I don't know.
yes, isn't that a discovery? Isn't that like isn't this the fundamental difference between science and engineering? I mean, I just feel like I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that is. But to me, like air conditioning is an invention. I guess. I mean, it is for sure. But theory of relativity, I don't see how that's an invention. But it doesn't really matter. I guess. I also here's another question I have for you. What is the purpose? Where are we? I mean, I know you're asking. It's like, no, but what do you mean? Where are we? You brought us here. Like, what do you mean? Where
Like
are
you're
we?
driving.
What do you mean you're lost? You told me confidently you knew exactly where we were going when we left. Like, you can't be lost. I am allowed to be lost. You're not allowed to be lost. No, but like, what are we in terms of why grade the importance of innovation wherever it may lie? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think it's that. Like, what? I mean, it's kind of an earnest question of like, what does that tell us? Does that tell us something that we didn't previously know? And I don't know that it does. You know, like, does the Nobel Prize tell us something that we don't already know? I mean, do we really not know what these things are? I mean, I just feel like, I mean, Nobel Prize is great and it's great to honor folks and so on. I mean, there's like other reasons to have these awards, but I just don't know that it tells us very much.
That's right. Is it meant to be some commentary on the lethargy of these kids or whatever? That younger generations are not innovating in the way that the greatest generation did, or something. But I'm not really sure that that's the intention either.
So and someone's pointing out in the chat, the secular stagnation is actually a technical term in economics. So it is long term in this sense. So thank you, Wikipedia. All right, that's like, all right, Nate Silver. I apologize. I apologize for that one. I apologize for that. And then so there's a question of like, why do this? Like, what does it buy us to do this? And then like, what does it mean for all of this to be stagnating or slowing down? Also, I feel like, are there important things that are missing? Which I think the answer to that is like, yes.
Gotta be yes, right.
Right. And then is it too early for us to, if we are going to be like really evaluative about the impact of these technologies, is it too early for us to be doing that? Or the technologies that only came out 15 years ago, 20 years ago?
That's a great point. And is it fair to look at a particular window of time? Because I can imagine that innovation, even in its longest term consequences, is not going to be uniformly distributed. Like that there are going to be, just by happenstance, decades that are more or less, by whatever measure Nate happens to be using or seems objectively true.
Totally. And what is that like? What is that? What's the meaning of like why 100 years and like why that? I also feel that like a kind of a whether this is true or certainly seems to be true. I mean, I'm always amazed at the and we've talked about this before, famous stressful event, World War II. Just the amount of innovation that came out when that kind of desperation, right? We've talked about this before. We talked about this on our kind of our GPT episode, that like the desperation being kind of an important trait in innovation. And when you're kind of comparing different times, you may be comparing times of like different levels of desperation at some level. And it's like, so you may be looking at the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I also feel that like there were, so in charge, maybe let's start with, do you want to start with things that we think that they might have been missing? I mean, that you have?
Sure, that's great.
There were a couple, and by the way, like, you don't need to just listen to us rant here. If people want to like hop on the stage and like just really, I've got a couple big ones that, and there were a couple folks pointing out too, that some big ones that were missing.
Yeah, what do you have on your list?
Well, I have to say, first among them, and this is something I would like to know more about, is the Haber process which is the industrial process that gave us fertilizer. And I think
is this like nitrogen fixing?
Yes, nitrogen fixing. Yeah. Huh. And like real questions about whether humanity could feed itself in the late 19th century, and whether that we would just starve to death because there were too many people chasing too few resources. And the industrialization of fertilizer was really, really important for that. I kind of feel like that's got to be on that. I mean, I think that's like right bullseye in the middle of that decade. It feels like that's super important. And I mean, I get this. It's also kind of the innovation that I think, Adam, you and I both gravitate to, which is like the stuff I really find interesting is the stuff that are kind of like the hidden bits that actually all of modernity depends on. Like you actually didn't realize that. And I mean, of course, I'm sure any chemist is like spitting out their drinking, like, this is not a hidden bit, pal. Like, this is, sorry, this is a big deal. But I think that there's a lot of stuff like that where you've got it's something that you don't necessarily see, but it has made your life possible. And I mean, I feel like the Haber processes would be, I don't know, that's one that I would be my nominee there.
You're saying like maybe bump safety razor off the list. We grow beards.
Whoa, not safety razor. We gotta leave
we feed humanity. I see.
Safety razor. Okay, yeah, that's a good also another example. Like, what does definitely not belong in the list? Safety razor does feel. I also got to say, vacuum cleaner. Really? I mean, you think vacuum cleaner is up there with the? I don't know.
I mean, who are we asking? We're asking some LLMs.
We're asking some LLMs. Some LLMs who apparently listen, the LLM can't grow a beard, can't grow facial hair, and it has always looked from afar and wondered what it would be like if
That's right.
And it feels I don't know, I'm an LLM, but it feels like really important. It feels like the safety razor was a big breakthrough for you all, right up there with the airplane, honestly.
Yeah.
So
the more modern one, I thought CRISPR seemed, I think that's like early 2000s or the aughts.
Yes.
It seemed like it should be on the list.
And actually, you bring up another good point. What is the point of putting a date on these things? I mean, because I feel like a lot of these things, it is hard to pinpoint. I mean, there are things obviously that you have like a breakthrough, a big breakthrough, but like even CRISPR and
telling me that the Isaacson book that I forced you to read, is that what you're trying to weasel around?
You didn't. I read it of my own volition. But I which I thought. I mean, is actually that book was actually okay. I think because the topic is so interesting.
Yes,
the topic is wild.
I remember your quote from the back cover.
This book is actually okay. Raves Brian Canson.
Actually, okay, because the topic is so interesting. Yes,
the topic is interesting. Yeah, they really wanted to use that one. They thought that was a pull quote that could really move copies. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not. My book also had an odor. Did yours have an odor? Did we talk about this?
Well, mine was electronic, so no.
I knew it. So this is like okay. Not to get too conspiratorial, but I'm like, is this some sort of like ebook thing where it's like now we're kind of like going to pot on the printed book and like there's an odor to kind of drive me to an electronic copy. All right, so you're
like a printed book truther vis-a-vis the odor of printed books.
That's right, and I'm going to have a tweet on this, and Nate Silver can have his own podcast talking about how crazy I am. Okay, so that's what's going to happen. That's the way.
I love that big ebook is forcing everyone into their DRM domain.
That's exactly right. Okay, well, of course it sounds crazy when you say it that way, but I just say, listen, do your own research. I just think that there are a lot of questions. I think there's
just asking questions here.
I'm just asking questions. I'm saying that book had an odor. It felt noxious, and I was overwhelmed with the desire to read ebooks after reading it. I don't know. Do your own research. Okay, and so there's another one in the chat on Norman Borlaug. I don't know if you and this is another part of the Green Revolution. So I was kind of going back to the Haber process for a second. Did you see this going around,
no.
Adam? There's apparently a bio on this guy, and someone who really we should get on the podcast. I can't remember where I saw this. Was like this bio is like the best bio I've ever read. So immediately when like, all right, I'm gonna go buy my copy for $2. It's like, no, you're not. You're gonna buy a copy for like $120, and it's but I'm really fascinated by the ag tech. I mean, ag tech is missing from this list, and I think ag tech is super important. That's my. Have you read Dream Reaper by Craig Gagnon? Have you talked about this?
No, I haven't.
So Dream Reaper is this book in the Sloan Technology series that I think is outstanding. The series is outstanding, but the book is really outstanding about a startup developing a bi-rotor combine. So going to compete with International Harvester and John Deere in ag machinery. Really interesting book. And it's also like a history of agricultural technology. And man, without ag tech, like you and I are in the fields. We all are. I mean, that's what it's really. I think everyone should get some reference. I'd like to get more reference. I wish there was more written about it, about ag tech, because I think it's so important. It's what has allowed us to go, tweet and argue about tweets. All right, so CRISPR we feel so that book on CRISPR though. Sorry to get back to your point. That book on CRISPR, the Isaacson books on CRISPR talks about like how. I mean, yes, our folks have won the Nobel Prize for it, but like there are a whole bunch of things that begin to. I mean, there's a bunch of things that happen over time, and it kind of a bunch of things had to be stitched together, and I feel that
Yeah.
this is like more true than not.
Yeah, no, I think that's got to be true of almost every innovation. I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe that was less true, when Newton was scratching his head thinking about stuff. But I think even then, it probably was not the case.
Yeah, it feels like I think okay, this is interesting because this does bring up a very important point about like discovery in like the Newton era or like the Euler era, right? Which is as a mathematician, where it does feel like, I mean, Euler is so ridiculously prolific, in part because, I mean, obviously, extraordinarily bright, extraordinarily energetic guy, but also like coming out at like kind of the right time in history in terms of being able to like a bunch of open problems in front of them. And I do feel like when we're like kind of comparing ages, I do feel like, yeah, of course, there are going to be eras in which a new domain is opened up. And it's just like, yeah, the problems are, I mean, easier is the wrong. Okay, I know we talked about this before, but like Dijkstra's algorithm. That's obvious, right?
I'm surprised you didn't lead with Dijkstra's algorithm. I thought that was going to be the first one out of the gate.
Do you have a bingo
But
card?
yeah,
Right now?
the problems were kind of thick on the ground, right? It wasn't.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like nothing against Dijkstra, although I guess we can go back to our podcast about the dragging Dijkstra. But I do feel that like I like to say that Dijkstra fired first in terms of denigrating not just basic, but everybody who learned basic, which includes me.
Right.
But I feel like Dijkstra's algorithm is like it's okay, it's great. It's great, but feel like, oh my God, that is just extraordinarily subtle. People must have like really struggled with this open problem for a protracted period of time. Yeah. And like those breakthroughs, I think, are like the ones that are wild and really interesting, but always seem like they have many, many people involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were talking about LLMs on every episode recently, and that's and that's arguably, I think there's a bunch of important work done in the early 2000s. Like I know, for example, at Facebook, but at other places as well, and dating back in previous decades, and it just happened that a bunch of stuff has worked out in surprising ways in the last couple of years.
Well, and I do think it's wild that Silver is like, innovation is slowing down, says man who asks computer to make his list for him. I mean,
I know. And even if his conclusion is like, geez, the years 2000 through 2010 were pretty slow. Like, well, did anything happen after that? Anything relevant for this conversation?
Yeah, and it did feel like he kind of had the conclusion because people were like, wait a minute, like how about GPGPUs? How about? I mean, I think he does have on his 2000 list. You do have cloud computing. 2002, like no, that's not 2002, right? That can't. I mean, S3 I think is like 2006, isn't it? I think 2002 for cloud computing. Like I love that the LLM has tried to leave a footnote there. Like, can you actually give us the whole thing? What does footnote 4 say? And I do love next to cloud computing. It's like, boy, what can rise the level of cloud computing? I don't know. USB drive. It's like what?
It's like I mean, and like the thing that we used for arguably 15 years and then haven't used since.
In terms of USB drives.
Yeah. I mean,
okay, well, look, I mean, now you're putting me in a position where I got to like defend USB drives. Like I think USB drive. I mean, I use USB drives all the time, but I just don't know that. I just, yeah, still, I'm going to use a USB drive tonight. Did you know that?
Okay. To get like the thing off of the thing, sure.
Yeah, to get the thing off the thing. Like right now, this is being right now as you speak. You got a micro USB drive that is actually recording this.
Wow.
Which I honor its contribution to this podcast and to civilization, but I don't feel it belongs on this list.
All right, well, take that. Let's see, Google Maps.
Like exactly, Google Maps, and so then you've got when Google Maps is another good example, right? Because like, what is the innovation of Google Maps? Like Google Maps is building on all sorts of different things, and they had some like wildly creative contributions. I don't know what I remember is the wildly creative contribution of Google Maps. It may not be the wildly creative contribution that other people remember, but I don't know about you, Adam. But like what I remember is like that was the app that was like, wow, Ajax is a thing. And Ashley is saying this in the chat as well. Like that way, Google Maps. Do you remember? Like that was wild. I remember where I was when I was first. We were in the MetaWeb office.
That's right. That's right. And this was building like because MapQuest or whatever was the state of the art.
MapQuest was the state of the art, and you were taking these GIS systems, which are kind of like these extant systems, and then combining it with this like really creative programming technique, and taking this like kind of hole in the browser that was XML HTTP request, and turning that into AJAX, asynchronous JavaScript and XML, and like that was that whole idea was like, I mean, that might be the even bigger contribution of Google Maps. I don't know. I mean, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And then you got the and I guess we're trying to like the big theme that Silver's trying to make is that things are slowing down. Again, I don't even know why. Okay, so what? Like, let's just say yes, it's slowing down. So like, do you want to get off? I mean, I just don't understand. Like, are you going to leave? I mean, I just don't understand what that means if it's slowing down. I mean, this kind of reminds me of, even though I would prefer to you to read SBF's positions, but SBF's position on Shakespeare, which I really was
I forgot about that.
It's like, why? What does that matter? And
maybe it's because we as humanity are using our precious resources more conservatively. I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, I guess if there was like a policy angle to it at the end, that would be kind of interesting, but I don't know that there is. And so here's the like somewhat serious reason why this is why we're here. I think it is really dangerous. I think we've talked about this before, but I really want to accentuate it. I think it is dangerous to imply that all problems have been solved. That there is no room for innovation. And I feel that, in each of these domains, I mean, because the implication is that these domains that were developed in the aircraft being developed in 1903 was that there's no innovation left in aircraft. It's like, no, false. Like there's no innovation left in these. It's like there is innovation left in lots and lots and lots of things. It's just, it feels less, as you say, it's not necessarily thick on the ground. It's like, you're going to have to work longer. You're going to have to work with a group of people. It's just going to be, it's going to be grindier.
This reminds me of, I think we've talked a bunch about that acquired episode on TSMC.
Yes, amazing.
And the crazy stuff that they need to do for like the extreme UV lithography and melting molten tin particles with lasers to emit this light at a particular wavelength. That is just wild to me. Like just standing on the shoulders of giants, and so forth, and how we would recreate all of this from nothing. It feels it's so path dependent. I'm not sure that if a couple of critical pieces of infrastructure just disappeared off the face of the earth, or knowledge disappeared, like how long it would take us as a society to recover.
And maybe that is like, is that the angle? Is that what's under people's fingernails? Is the idea that like, no, because it's like not a lone inventor, like I myself can't understand it. So like I am reminded about how small I am in the universe. In which case, like, get over it, get over yourself. But I totally agree. I don't know, like as a kid, did you ever read A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court?
For sure.
And actually, this is a role reversal. Do you know why? I did not read it. I listened to it.
On a cassette?
On a cassette.
Wow.
On a cassette. So this was actually amazing. So there was a theater group actually based out of San Francisco, and called the Jabberwocky, and they had a company called the Mind's Eye, and they made these. They would record literature, but it would be acted. It was like old radio timey acting, and they were amazing. And so my sister and I used to listen to these over and over and over again. So listen to like Huck Finn and the Odyssey.
I got time out. Was this actually a cassette or was it a record? Just tell me the truth. It's fine. We can move on. I just need to know.
It was. Why would it not be a cassette? Why it is a cassette, but why would it not be a cassette? I mean, I listened.
I don't know. Could have been a record. I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
I listened. You know what? I listened to like the Disney 33 RPM goobers on.
Okay.
That was on record.
Okay.
Everyone's.
That's fine.
I just.
Oh,
it's fine.
Yeah.
It's no. So I listened to that on record and on vinyl, but I didn't know this was. I don't know even if these were available. These were only on cassette, so you had to get.
Okay.
You had to. It's on cassette. Wait a minute, that wasn't a serious question. I've been. It was on 8-track. No, it was on a cassette. And I actually still have a couple of these. Because
Nice.
I felt like they're like I've looked so they're hard to find. You can find them on eBay occasionally. But there are because I want my own kids to listen to them. I mean, it's like timeless literature and it's amazing. And so and then it also came at very timely when I was at school. I realized that like actually I don't really need to read the Odyssey because I've listened to it so many times. I didn't read the Odyssey until I was an adult, actually. And actually, I can still hear the voice of the actor who played Odysseus in my head. It was just amazing. And so I would love to get a hold of these things just because I think they're so outstanding, and I hope that they're not all lost. But so the Connecticut Yankee King Arthur's Court was a great book, right? Mark Twain book about a guy that goes back in time, and he uses his knowledge of modernity in medieval. I mean, it's such a great premise. Like Mark Twain, man, that guy's good. That guy just had some good ideas.
That's a hot take. Yeah.
That's a hot take. World War II stressful. Mark Twain, talented.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Pretty good. And I just remember as a kid thinking like, what would I bring back? And I do feel like it is, I mean, so many of the things we've built have built so much on one another that like, you take a single microprocessor back in a time machine and it's really, you can't eat it. It's just not going to be, it's going to be a very limited utility.
Yeah.
And, and maybe that's kind of what maybe people have like nostalgia for that era. I'm not sure that era ever really existed, honestly, in terms of like an era where but maybe, in Twain's time, 19th century, it did feel like it's, it's very steampunky, says 19th century historian Brian Cantrell. I'm sorry, I'm going to shut up. This is just like, but it is, I mean, you're in a period of like massive technological change during the post Civil War, just the connection of the country and railroads and everything. You got all the telegraph, you got a bunch of stuff going on. And I love that idea of kind of like, how would you kind of leverage leverage the knowledge too, kind of back in time. I think it was a great idea.
Yeah.
But it feels like it would be hard to do that now. Like, I'm not sure what you'd take with you.
Totally. Like what? Like I feel like I would die almost instantly. Like I would not have my contact lenses and I would just be done and of totally no use to society. Like my soft hands, not even helpful for gathering food.
You're selling your hands short. I think your hands are short for
there you go. All right.
For gathering food.
Good.
So sorry, we digress. In terms of like the collaboration, so you mentioned the TSMC acquired episode. Sorry to kind of get us rerailed here, but just in terms of like how remarkable it is, and each generation requires so many like impossible problems to be solved. I mean, it really is. It's outstanding. I mean, it's just amazing. Kind of like I feel when you dig in any of these technology areas, you find all of these ways, and I mean, we've said it on here before. It's like, where is the book on the PCB? I mean, the PCB is so amazing, and we've kind of, and I think it is really important that people realize, like, no, there are a lot of open problems, and innovation is continuing. I don't know where the pace of innovation is. I don't know, and I don't know how meaningful it is, but there's a lot of hard problems to be solved and a lot of like important breakthroughs to be had, I feel. And a lot of those important breakthroughs are on the things that like people are kind of, I mean, there's a solace in working on a problem that people aren't paying attention to. It's the only,
absolutely.
Only computer startup in. But I feel we did do that a lot with, I mean, like a lot of system software. So in terms of like, what would be on your software list, by the way?
I was making a software list, and
what's on software list?
Very unsurprising, but like, C to Rust is kind of a big fucking deal.
It is a big,
and like not just because Rust is whizzy and we're Rust fanboys and all that stuff, but actually it introduces like some very important different concepts, and has really changed the way that the productivity of folks and the way that people build software and the kind of software that we build and so forth. And Rust it's part of a chain, but all of those innovations have been incredible and really important.
Really important. And so, I often like it when kind of people decry like the lack of innovation. I'm like, okay, go back into a time machine in 1990 or in 2000, and there's a lot that is different. I mean, a
Mm,
lot that's different, and just from like, and different in terms of like the way you live your like life. The way you talk to your kids, or contact your kids, or the fact that you're like in like Safeway searching the web for like a recipe for this like rump roast that's on sale, wondering like, do I have the
yes,
ingredients? It's like that's bonkers.
that's
The
right.
fact
These
that
incredible things have become so banal. Yes.
so banal. And I mean, you could imagine, I mean, like we're talking about like going backward in time, but if you were to take someone from the past and bring them forward in time, and they'd be like, whoa, that's like your communicator? Like, can you have like a video chat with Adam? Like, I could, but it's like, no, we're not gonna do that right now. Like we could, but like you can do that and you don't do that all the time. It's like, no, we don't do that all the time because it's
No, it's really
weird.
annoying. Yes.
It's
Yes.
super annoying. It sounds, I know person from 1990, that sounds like wild. And it is wild, but then you kind of get over it. I mean, so I feel that like just to your Rust, because it's kind of interesting to do the thought experiment of like what would it be like to go back in time. And I did this not just as a thought experiment this weekend. I have to tell you, I was writing a lot of C this weekend for the first time in a minute. Have you written a lot of C recently?
I've not written a lot of C, but I did write some C, and I was very proud of myself that it sort of worked. But
So
it
I
was
was
not a lot of C.
I was making kind of a delicate change in the linker,
Mm,
and it was I mean it would really felt off-putting. It's like, wow, this is cannot believe we used to do it this way all the time. It feels
yeah.
so like, and there's like in so many different regards. It feels like I mean, and I think like our linker is clean, like it's relatively clean code. As C code goes, this is good C code.
Mhm.
It is still, there's so much implicit behavior everywhere. And
Absolutely.
you know, like I, you and I both understand memory safety really well. And I, had an initial cut of this that seg faulted when you ran the linker. And I mean, as one does, but not because of memory safety. It was because of initialization. And
Hmm.
there was this structure is used as like a static initializer and kind of implicitly assumes like C doesn't warn me. Like I had to like discover that like, wait a minute, there's another way to initialize the structure that doesn't, I mean, there's nothing to prevent you. And I think that Adam, you and I both remarked on this, like the ability to fearlessly refactor code in Rust. I mean, that is just, that's otherworldly coming from C.
Absolutely. I mean, it's changed the way I think about writing software. Like that that if you don't feel that sense of fearlessness, you're kind of doing something wrong. Like you haven't built constructed things appropriately and so forth. And that's very
Totally.
different. Like back in the day, I would, after I committed some change to the Solaris kernel, I would not sleep well. I would wake up early and I would check that everything was okay. I don't know if you did this as well, but like
Yeah.
every time you're like, have I thought through everything? Because it felt like operating without a net.
Yeah, I still do that. I still do not sleep. After the swap of investment the change that we talked about last week, and we had an issue we had a performance issue that we encountered this past week, and I'm like, I've broken this somehow. This is me. This is cancel. It was not me, but it was actually it was a very old issue. But and then the points you made too in the chat, Adam, that like if you were to take Rust and take it back in time to 1990, not a foregone conclusion at all that it would be successful. In part because it would take like it would take a
You mean to your
long
16 megabyte machine? Like,
right.
how's that going to work?
Right. That you've got like the resource limits are really different. And I think that, one of the amazing things about Rust is it creates these small artifacts, but it takes a lot of horsepower to create those small artifacts.
Yeah.
This is actually one of the things that I was wondering about, like in semiconductor, in following Moore's law, how much of Moore's law or Wright's law or whatever you want to call it, how much of that was being accelerated by Moore's law? In other words, like how much did we need the faster processing machines to be able to simulate that next gen? And folks in semiconductors sort of like, no, like you definitely needed that. You could not that's part of why you can't kind of skip generations, because we've actually needed the software that we've been able to build on that to be able to build the next generation. I mean, it's very iterative in that regard.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So and yeah, someone in the chat is like, Rust artifacts are small. Like, I'm sorry, do you not have the do you not know how to run the stat system call today? For embedded Rust, they're very small. And I think actually like the binaries themselves, yeah, small is not the first word that comes to mind, especially because this thing I was debugging over the weekend was a binary with I think 240,000 sections in it. So yes, fine, not small.
Not small.
Including a section, Adam, that I believe you must have added because it involved the words dtrace and eat. Yes.
Yep. Nope. You nailed it.
I'm like, I think I might know who's involved in creating that section.
Yeah.
I assume that is that's the work that you and Ben Acker did. I would assume.
That's right. That's right. That was putting a probe descriptions from USDT, from usually on statically defined tracing, dtrace for Rust in a kind of format that was convenient for us to do from ASM macros. So yeah, don't get rid of those yeet sections. They're very load bearing.
You'd be happy to know that the yeet section is but one section of the 250,000. It's all actually the GCC accept sections is basically all it is. Yeah. But all right, so what are some of your other? Because I absolutely agree with you, and the thought was occurring to me too. Like, wow, Rust is really it's such a, and this is like not something that Nate Silver is going to put in a tweet.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like this is something that's such a big deal to practitioners, and I feel like in every domain there are things like this. Like, no, this is a really big deal to practitioners, but if you're not a practitioner, you're not going to necessarily appreciate it. All you're going to appreciate is like the better artifacts that result from it.
So this isn't exactly spot on to the early 2000s, but it's not far off, which is horizontally scaled systems. And the conversation I'm thinking of, which was in 2000 when I was an intern at Sun. We were like walking downstairs to go get lunch, and Sun had just shipped, and I think it was an 8 CPU, like vertically scaled machine, like 8 socket, 8 core. It was like 1 core per socket, all that stuff.
Yes, and walking. I believe we were walking upstairs from lunch. Is that possible?
Okay. Yeah, I think the direction. Well, there you go. So I could definitely possible, but I would say the crux of it was I said, for $100,000, couldn't I get 100 computers instead of this one computer with 8 CPUs in it? And we're like, sure. I don't know. I'm sure they thought about it. They have not thought about it, dear listener.
No, we had not thought about it, and it was in hindsight, that was the moment that Sun was doomed.
Yeah, but like horizontally scaled systems, like really, really big deal. That I think, obviously people have been writing distributed systems of various descriptions for a very long time, but I feel like it was at about that time that it went from like a thing you could do to the way that you did things.
Totally. Yeah, and I think the idea that, and then I think some things that came. I think Raft is a big deal, honestly, because, on the one hand, it is Paxos had a couple of implementations, and or there have been a couple of implementations of distributed consensus, but that's like a one where it's like this was done in a way that was much more readily comprehensible, and then it could be adopted by a bunch of different. Software was able to actually incorporate this, and it's really important for there's a bunch of like people don't have to necessarily deal with the distributed consensus problem because they're using software that solves that for them. And that was not true even as recently as like 15 years ago. It was Zookeeper 15 years ago was the only, have you ever dealt with Zookeeper?
No, I think the closest I got was Camille telling me not to use it.
That's like every user of Zookeeper is just like it just trying to warn you away from it because it's ZK is really, really tough to manage. And so like that's an important, the movement to Raft is like really important. And that's another one of these things that's just like not going to make a Nate Silver list, but is also like indisputably important. And it allows you to build. And I feel like, again, there's like stuff like that there's so much stuff like that. And I feel
yeah. I don't like to use the term sea change because I don't know that I'm using it properly, but this feels like one where rather than forcing these monolithic systems to become ever more reliable, we realized that we could make more reliable systems out of less reliable components. And that was a huge deal.
Yeah, that was a big deal. Yeah, and because it's just changing the economics of these systems and allowing for totally. I think, Ashley had pointed out on Twitter, if not in the chat, that like, hey, how about like antibiotics? Wasn't that the first? Just going back to like the things that might be. I mean, there's just nothing health related here at all. It feels like there've been. I mean, we talked about CRISPR, and it feels like there's just. I mean, there's so many breakthroughs there. And I was talking recently to a parent of a kid who had childhood leukemia, and like that was an absolute death sentence, and it's now basically not. And that's, I mean, what an amazing. I mean, I feel like there've been a bunch. I mean, obviously, the mRNA based vaccines have been. I mean, I feel like there've been so many big healthcare breakthroughs for, I mean, all the challenges in healthcare and so on, all the economic challenges. Like there's some big breakthroughs out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
And it
just
feels like
literally life changing. Absolutely.
and it feels like there are going to be some in the early that first decade of the 2000s as well. It feels like there I did love the fact that the blockchain in Bitcoin was on the chat GPT list. It's like, oh, come on. I mean, are you and then the Tesla Model S also seems like it feels like a product. Not, I don't know. Now I'm just like,
yeah, it's like, yeah, sure. I don't know. Electric vehicles, like big deal. Like making the mass market, also big deal. But like, did Tesla invent that? Like, no. Battery technology is incredibly important. Like maybe that's, but that's a level of innovation along the lines of lithography changes, right? Like that.
right.
Each one of these, each new cathode, each new nanode is like a big deal in its own right, but it is kind of incremental.
Well, and just that incrementalism, like how many innovations really can be isolated from their time and context? I bet not very many. You're just like thinking,
that's right.
Like how many of these things are like, okay, yeah, we can actually take that back into the time machine, and it's like it feels like you really. I mean, even like we were talking about Wiles's proof of Fermat's last theorem as kind of that. I mean, even that like really relied on a bunch of math that was like relatively new at that time.
Yeah.
And and yeah, someone in the chat is like, this is the Arthur C. Clarke line, which that any level of sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, which I actually think is very true and a huge problem. I do feel that like so I think part of the problem about the way we get here, that like, okay, there's nothing new, is because like these abstractions are preventing you from appreciating what brought this to you. You know what I mean? Like there's no one, and you look at something as basic as like ag tech, it's like, you really got to go seek that out. No one's going to like take you aside and be like, by the way, like, here's why your life depends on the Haber process. Or, here's why the birotor combine is a really important innovation. Or I feel like I think it's really important that we like stoke that curiosity to like take this stuff apart and learn how it's broken in order to be able. I mean, just like this really is a clip show, isn't it? Going back to Simon Willison, and I loved his like running like slow bad LLMs to learn how they work, and that's it's really important to like rip through those levels of abstraction so you realize that it's actually not magic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's too easy to just take for granted, and I think I remember in 2015, I think like Back to the Future 2 takes place in 2015, which felt like an important movie of my childhood. So when it was actually 2015 and we didn't have flying cars, everyone felt very disappointed. But I'm sure if we had flying cars, they would have felt very pedestrian by then.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting to think about, because like we love to focus on like the flying cars and the jetpacks and the moon bases, and like, all right, I feel ripped off on that stuff. But like we've got like the real-time video chat with grandma. Like, don't we want to talk about that one? Like, no, that one, because that one is pedestrian. It's like, it's boring. It's like, no, but that's kind of the point, right? It's like we're fixating on the stuff that we and you're right. If we had flying cars, you'd be like, no, not flying cars. I wanted jetpacks, not flying cars. Like,
that's right. I wanted
car.
flying cars on Mars. But it's like, well, we only have cars on Mars, and like they're unmanned. Like that's boring.
It's
actually
boring.
That's amazing.
It is totally. And did you, someone actually had on Mastodon had pointed us to a Andrea Collier video on that. I don't know if you saw.
Yeah, I did. I watched about 2/3 of it. Terrific video.
She's amazing, astrophysicist, but she was taking apart like there have been no advances in physics in the last 70 years, which does feel like, okay, that's a pretty generous, like you got to, and but I don't know if you've gotten to it yet or not, but she was like, it's also just like this, the rebuttal on this could just be lasers. I mean, lasers are so incredibly important for absolutely everything that we do. And
Yeah.
that is all like physics has brought that too. But she also makes a really important point that I feel like you kind of hit on a bit with the Rust point too, where you have like a breakthrough, but it's not really appreciated because it's out of its context or it needs other breakthroughs. And it's only like 15 years later that like, okay, now we can really appreciate that and bring it to a much broader. I mean, certainly that's happened with many, 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 many things. And the other peril of kind of like assigning a particular date to these things.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I do love. There's a great bit. Someone in the chat is a bit by Louis C.K. talking about how he like thinks it's so ridiculous that people complain about Wi-Fi on the plane. He's like, do you ever like think of like you're in an aluminum tube moving at like 600 miles an hour, 35,000 feet above the earth, and you're complaining and like this that you like it's
Yeah. And you're pissed because they're out of Pringles and the Wi-Fi is not working. It's like
the Wi-Fi's not working. Like seriously, just like
right.
what's
I'm old enough to remember when Wi-Fi was just blew my fucking mind. Like the idea
Wi-Fi
that I could
did
have
blow your
my
mind.
oh yeah, I mean my mind in particular. Yeah, no, but
No, because like you were my
no, I
early adopter on
remember.
Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember how I was all in on Wi-Fi. I remember interviewing its son, asking if I could, work from the roof for the parking lot. You're like, why would you want to do that? But knock yourself out, buddy.
God, I remember that so vividly. We are so goddamn old. This is like it's like you learned about Wi-Fi from Adam? Like, yes. And he sounded crazy when he described it. Like there are no wires anywhere. It's like
It's like,
that
well, that's gonna work, right?
yeah, like, yeah, like that can't possibly. No, I do remember like God, the first time you had Wi-Fi, like, oh my God, I'm not plugged in anywhere. This is
Yeah,
amazing. And you gotta feel like there's gonna be stuff for sure, like in 20 years, like I just feel it and actually on that note, you are an early adopter of so much. The Vision Pro. Where are you on the Vision Pro?
nah, no, pass. Like
Yeah.
it's so expensive, man. And what am I gonna? So I mean, part of it is I'm not that interested. Second, if I sat at my desk with the Vision Pro on, like my wife would just like poke me in the back of my head when I wasn't looking. Like it would just invite ridicule at home and at the office.
At home and abroad. Is Steve actually going to
Yes.
barge? Steve is threatening to barge on stage. But is Steve wearing his goggles right now? That's the question. Steve's here. Steve, you've barged on
I'm
stage.
not. I'm not wearing my goggles right now. I have not bought a Vision Pro, even though I keep flirting with the idea constantly. My estimations of how successful it's going to be has been rapidly going up and down over the last couple days since we did
Oh
the
yeah,
prediction
yeah,
episode.
yeah.
In particular, first of all, because the thing that I said back then was that I thought it was basically the equivalent of MacBook Pro, but it turns out it's actually like significantly less powerful. So therefore, my estimate went down. I was like, oh, looking bad for my suggestion. But there's like a lot of subtleties in the way that they've built it that I think make it seem very interesting and possibly good. So it kind of like my vibes went back up on it. So I think I'm still where I originally was at, but there's been a lot of interesting stuff since it's actually in people's hands now.
Steve, whatever it's worth, I too have been thinking about your prediction these last couple of days, and I've been bullish. I think because to me, like your prediction was this is going to be successful enough that they do another one, and it feels that way. It feels like,
Yeah.
and it feels like the tech is just looks like it's mind bending. I just don't know. It just feels like it's a
It's
segue
still
for the
too
face.
expensive for too many people. Yeah, it's like still too expensive for mass adoption, and it's still like too big and weird. But like if you can get that in a sunglasses form factor someday, or like something that's like maybe large glasses form factor, like I think that significantly helps. If you can get the screens down lower. Anyway,
When you say large glasses, I'm envisioning like not like clown glasses though, not those kind
of
of
course,
glasses.
like clown glasses. Everyone will think that's
Okay.
super normal, right? It'll be future fashion. But yes, I don't think you can ever truly get it to that side. Blah, blah, blah. I just think that like the focus on AR over VR is like a smart thing, and we'll like see how it ends up. That's all.
And so one thing I saw going online just kind of goes good. This is also this like the pace of innovation, but like how innovations happen and are they ahead of their time? Is this like the Apple Newton? And Steve, did you have a Newton?
I never owned a Newton. No, I did a little bit of like Palm Pilot development in college because there was a class about that, but I never really significantly used those class of machines. Feel strong, but like they are computers. So yeah, sure. I never really had that stuff.
But the Newton also feels like there's something that there was a lot that ended up being important in the Newton that we kind of laughed at the time, or people that dismissed at the time. Adam, did you have a Newton? No.
No. I had a Palm Pilot as well, but you're right. Like part of it was like I was a kid, right? Like I didn't have whatever hundreds of dollars to blow on a Newton. But I guess that was part of the problem. Like nobody had those hundreds of dollars to blow on that particular device. But I was very excited for it.
Right. When I came out to Silicon Valley, was right when they had the vigil for it. They had like a candlelight vigil for that. It was like in like 90, maybe 93 or 94. So maybe slightly before I came out. But I'd say, like, in conclusion, well, aside from like Nate Silver being perhaps right that secular stagnation is a term, I don't think that the pace of innovation has not been stagnant at all. I think that there's been a lot, and I also think, Adam, I am going to make this other larger point. I think that I think that we've got a cultural malaise with respect to grievance. I think we focus, and maybe I've done it too by being trolled by this, but you know what I mean? Like, I think that we don't focus enough on gratitude. We focus too much on grievance. And people are like, just to your point about like, damn it, I didn't get the flying cars. Like, forget, I'm going to ignore all this other stuff that I got. It's like, you got, like, there's a lot going on that you got, and we can focus on that stuff. There's a lot to be grateful for.
I think that's right. But I also think you kind of sound crazy when you're like, I mean, one of the things I feel like I talk people's ear off is like the fact that people have 10 gigabit Ethernet in the walls of their own home is mind-blowing to me.
This is such a preview of like the way of us we're going to be in the same like long-term care facility, right, Adam? Do we have that in our children?
Sure.
I just want to be on the porch with you when we sound like such fossils now. I can't even imagine what it's going to be. So great in 40 years. I just want to be wheeled out on the porch with you.
But hold on. Okay. I think I know the answer based on what you just said. But there's 10 gigabit Ethernet like on normal copper wires that like you found in your basement, not blow your mind, and like 10 gigabit Ethernet into your house in like a piece of glass that like some dude strings down the manhole cover. I don't know how they actually do it, but probably something like that.
Yes, in fact, we have got fiber that is like literally strung up to the house. And when they strung it up, I'm like, are we going to reinforce that anymore? It's like this little thread that hangs kind of prominently from the house. And it feels like extremely fragile to me. And so whenever like we have weather the way we did this weekend, I just go out and stare at that little thread getting whipped around, being like, I'm going to have a full mutiny on my hands. Just, dear God, if you take the internet, take the power with it, or it's going to be mutiny over here.
Yeah.
Adam, I'm sorry I got trolled over this. Are
you sorry?
I'm getting sorrier, actually. As we kind of got into this, I think I am feeling something that like might approach remorse. So yeah, I think maybe I'm going to work on that.
Good. But
I think these lists don't really, the stuff that's interesting is all the stuff that's much deeper, and we gotta dig to get that stuff. Also, people are asking for an Oxide book club in the chat. On that note, what are you reading right now, Adam? Are you reading?
I've kind of started a couple of books on crypto, which means that I only read them sporadically. One is Number Go Up by I think his name is Zeke Foe, which is like, as our colleague noted, the most fake sounding real name that anyone's ever had. Oh, and I just started another book
on cryptocurrency.
And I started another book on this. I can't remember the name of it. I gotta go look it up, but it's on a startup that was doing facial recognition software in like the most terrifying Big Brother-ish way possible. But I'll keep you posted on that one.
Yeah, can you post on that one? I'm finishing up this history of Sun, I think, and I actually found one other history of Sun. So I think I will have read all histories of Sun. I'm done with my my son binge. And then I've got a book on McKinsey that I'm excited to read. But we need to like we should come up with like a book that is good that we can
I
all
love
read.
it.
Yeah,
I
so
love it. Like pick a book, kind of shoot for March or April or something. Give everyone a heads up and do your homework or don't. But
and
I
it
love
will be, the pressure will be on, because I like really can't be a book that was like last published in 1982 and was only self-published, because we've learned that we can actually drive the
Wyatt,
price up.
I was gonna go buy all of them up on eBay, and then
Never
it's like
mind. I will
Oprah's
do that.
book club, but for us.
Oprah's book club, but a racket from
That's right.
from the people that discovered Wi-Fi from one another. Oh man. All right, well, hey, this has been fun. We got a bunch of good shows in the pipe, so we're not only just being trolled by the internet. We've got a bunch of good stuff coming. And stay tuned. Thanks, everybody. And sorry, Adam.